clothed and in his right mind. Friends, please be seated. Is it on? Now it's on. Clothed and in his right mind. You would think that if someone is sitting there clothed and in their right mind, your reaction might be to rejoice. It might be to celebrate. It might be to finally have a conversation that makes sense. And yet, when those who knew this man, who had chained this man and sent him out to live among the tombs, showed up and saw him clothed and in his right mind, they were afraid. Friends, how many of you have gotten so used to your chains that you're afraid to cast them off? Maybe your chain is addiction. Maybe your chain is a relationship that's just bad news. Maybe your chain is the grief of a relationship that you have lost that you cannot move on from. Maybe it's forgiveness that you cannot extend or forgiveness that has not been granted to you. I think every single one of us in this room is chained to something that it is more comfortable for us to keep than to change. Change is hard and it's terrifying, and sometimes the devil we know is better than the one we don't. And so we're afraid. We're afraid of what it would look like to have the conversation, to move on and to love another, to actually let our grief show. Oh, friends, we live in a culture where grief is not allowed to show. Changing and putting aside and putting down those things that we have gotten used to. They might be terrifying, they might be fearful to us, they might be actively hurting us, but putting those things down and aside is so much more terrifying than just living with them, getting used to it. So often, we are afraid of what it looks like to be free, of what it looks like to live by the name that we were given or the name that we have chosen. It's so much more terrifying because it changes the relationships around us. It changes how we live. It gets us out of the rut in which we live. But here's the thing with this gospel, friends. It is not actually just about our individual imprisonment. This is a political gospel. Luke intentionally chooses the word legion. He could have used any number of other words to describe the many demons that have been living in this person, but he does not. He chooses the word legion, and in the ancient Roman Empire, that word means one thing. It means 6,000 Roman troops gathered to colonize your country. That's what a legion is, 6,000 Roman troops. And in 60 CE, just a bit before we think this gospel was written, the general Vespasian, who might have then become an emperor, I don't know, the Roman emperors come and go with great frequency. The general Vespasian sent a legion of troops into the land of the Gerasenes, which is just across the lake from the town of Galilee. He slaughtered 1,000 young men, imprisoned their families, burnt their city, and then razed their villages. When the readers of this story hear Jesus saying these words, meeting a man in tombstones, the assumption is probably that those are the graves of their dead, of their family and their friends slaughtered by a legion of the Roman army. Jesus tells a story and engages with a person who is the victim of an occupying power. Violence is the way of the world, my friends. Bullies, bullying bullies, bullying bullies, thinking that somehow that will solve the problem. Nothing has changed. Empires are going to empire, no matter what they do. Empires are going to empire, and people will die. And we might come to love some of those people. Indeed, it may be that some of our friends and family and loved ones will die in the violence that seems to be spreading before us. But there's also a little bit of humor in this story, because one of the legions that occupied Jerusalem and was responsible for tamping the city down and then pacifying the surrounding region of Palestine had as their symbol, guess, a swine. So there's a little bit of humor when Legion says to Jesus, just let us go into the pigs, surely it will be better there, and then the pigs run themselves right off a cliff. There's a little bit of satire, a little bit of political poking that is happening in this story. Friends, I know that each and every one of us can tell a story of how we have been imprisoned. But we too are Legion. We too are Legion, and Juneteenth, celebrated 4 days ago, reminds us of how we as a nation, we have been Legion. We have chosen as a nation to build our wealth on the bodies of enslaved peoples. Enslaved peoples that we ensured could not read and could not write, because when you read and write about freedom, you want to be free. We gave them edited Bibles. Indeed, we debated even whether black folks could be baptized, because Christians knew that in Jesus Christ there is neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, male or female, and we didn't want black folks reading that story. Reading was punishable by death. Learning was something done in the shadows, in the darkness where it was safe. And that reading had such an impact that even though the Emancipation Proclamation was read out loud and published in newspapers across the Union, even the Confederate portion of that Union, in Galveston, Texas, the news did not really reach the enslaved. I'm sure it reached the ears of the masters. But it did not reach the ears of the enslaved. And it took 3 years and the marching of an army and the announcement of a general to say, you have been free for 3 years. It was too dangerous to allow people to read and sit in their right minds and have their own names and wear their own clothing. That kind of dignity, that kind of recognition of the full humanity of people that we kidnapped from Africa, that recognition of the full humanity simply couldn't be compatible with the ways in which our nation chose to treat people. And so we treated them as less than human, and we made up stories about how they were more sexually lascivious or more violent or simply unable to learn. And when they did learn, And when they did speak, we found other ways to ensure that the mass enslavement on which our country was built turned into the mass incarceration of people of color. That is a t-shirt that I wear on occasion that I got from the Legacy Museums, built by the Equal Justice Initiative, an initiative that was founded in representing Black men on death row who were probably innocent. Brian Stevenson founded the Equal Justice Initiative, and it has blossomed into a set of museums. And if you are ever in Montgomery, Alabama, as a matter of fact, I would suggest you go to Montgomery, Alabama for this set of museums alone. It is one of the most powerful displays of the way in which our country moved from mass enslavement to mass incarceration by ensuring that we told a story that Black and brown bodies are more dangerous than white bodies. And we need to contain them and control them. We need to chain them, whether it's through laws that demanded that they prove that they have a job, and if they didn't, we threw them into prison so they could do more work. Whether it's by forbidding mortgages in entire neighborhoods so that they couldn't repair their houses, so that then we, those of us in power, could turn around and say, oh, look, they can't take care of their homes. Whether it's by denying health care, assuming that Black women's bodies can somehow bear more pain than white women, and denying pain medicine. That is the story of our nation, and it continues. We tell stories about immigrants who come here as if they are dangerous when the vast majority of them are escaping danger in their own countries, often danger that we as a nation have actually helped create. We tell stories about how trans bodies are dangerous and they're going to convert you in a bathroom. We tell stories about how people are dangerous and need to stay in chains so that we do not have to change, because we are afraid. But friends, we read a gospel of liberation. We read a gospel of a God who over and over and over again sets God's people free. It is the story of creation. It is the story of the Exodus. It is the story of a people constantly called to free all of those in their midst, whether that freedom happens by letting a little bit of wheat stay on the edges of the field so everybody can glean and have enough food, or the freedom of welcoming the stranger, or the freedom of redistributing wealth and land. Did you know that that's what the Jubilee is? The Jubilee in Hebrew Scripture is the call to take the wealth that tends to concentrate in the hand of a few, and every 50 years, spread it back out again so that everybody has the opportunity to work with dignity and live with dignity and have a house and sit clothed and in their right mind. That is our God. And thank God that some folks learned to read. Thank God that people of color and immigrants got a hold of the Bible and didn't let it go, because they reminded those of us in power that we follow a God of liberation, a God who breaks the chains not only that hold us as individuals in prison, but a God who demands that we break the chains of all of those around us. People of color have repeatedly reminded us that the liberation of one is the liberation of all. The chains that I bear as a product of a white supremacist society are chains that, friends, I cannot avoid. When I walk down the street and I see a Black man, I have a moment. I don't like to admit that, but I have a moment. I have a pause when I think, is he dangerous? The gift that I have now is that I recognize that I have that thought, and I can acknowledge it, and I can decide, no, I am not going to act the way that my body has been trained to act, which is look away, cross, pause, put my hand on my wallet or my phone pocket, be a little bit tense. That's come after years of awareness and practice, and that is just one example of the many ways in which we are trained to be afraid of those around us. And friends, it takes intentional learning. We cannot learn to be unafraid of those that our society says are dangerous just by reading a book. It's a good place to start. Don't get me wrong. Read a book. There's plenty of material out there. Read a book about the dignity of people of color. Read a book about the ways in which racism has destroyed their lives and the lives of their family. Read a book about how racism has destroyed our lives. Read a book about the reality of homelessness and who actually suffers the violence and the sickness of having to live unhoused. Friends, it's not most of us in this room right now. Then take a class. Learn how to have a conversation. Pay attention to what your body does when you walk by one of our unhoused folks. Does it get tense? You've already started a conversation with them the moment you tense up, because they read it, because their survival depends on reading your body language. That is true for a trans person walking into a room. It is true for anybody who's queer. It is true for anybody who is of color. To walk into a space that is not necessarily their own is to learn the body language of all of us who live in our own chains. Friends, I don't know what chain God is calling you to break. It may be a chain personal in your life that is real and it is necessary. It may be a chain that is a part of our society's imprisonment of those who are dangerous. But thank God for people who have read the Bible and reminded us that our God is a God of liberation. Our God is one who breaks chains and invites everybody to sit fully clothed and in their right mind. May it be so.